Good morning, everyone. I'm going to call the Assembly Committee on Judiciary to order. Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod.
Here.
Assemblywoman Cohen.
Here.
Assemblywoman Gonzalez.
Here.
Assemblywoman Hanson.
Here.
Assemblywoman Hardy.
Here.
Assemblywoman Kasama. Assemblywoman Krasner.
Here. Here.
Assemblywoman Marzola.
Here.
Assemblyman Miller.
Here.
Assemblywoman Wynn.
Here.
Assemblyman O'Neill. Assemblyman Orntlicker.
Here.
Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Here.
Assemblyman Wheeler.
Here.
Chairman Yeager.
Here, everybody is present with the exception of Assemblyman O'Neill. He is presenting a couple of bills in government affairs this morning, so please mark him absent excused until he arrives, and I'll try to note that for the record. That means we do have a quorum this morning. Good morning to members, to the guests who are joining us on the Zoom, and to those who may be watching over the internet, either on the legislature's website or on the YouTube channel. Welcome to day 53 of the 81st session of the Nevada Legislature, which means we're just 1 week away from the halfway point. Before we get started this morning, I'm going to go over just a few quick housekeeping matters. If you're on the Zoom with us, could you please mute unless you are speaking? And if you are presenting a bill today, please remember to state your name each time you speak, especially when you answer a question. That'll help our committee secretary prepare accurate minutes. We do expect courtesy and respect in our interactions with one another. We don't always agree on policy. That's perfectly acceptable, but we have to make sure we're being respectful of each other, of the legislative institution, and of our hardworking staff. And then finally, many members will be using multiple devices to access this virtual meeting, including laptops, desktops, extra monitors, iPads, iPhones. So please don't see it as a sign of disrespect. If members appear to be looking away, they're most likely accessing exhibits or notes. With that behind us, members, you can see we have 4 bills on the agenda, but before we get to those, our legal staff has been working very hard, and I have in front of me a stack of committee BDR introductions, and I have 7 of them, so that tells me that legal was likely working through the night to get these to us, and so I just want to say thank you to everyone who's pulling long hours to make sure we get the bills introduced. So I will read these off, and then I'll take one motion, and we'll do a roll call vote. And again, this is simply a BDR introduction, so it doesn't commit you to supporting the concept. What it allows to happen is the BDR to be drafted into a bill, introduced on the floor, and then it would come back to committee for a potential hearing. So what I have in front of me is BDR 3-138 revises provisions relating to the collection of child support. BDR 43-485 revises provisions related to prohibited acts concerning the use of marijuana and the operation of a vehicle or vessel. BDR 41-643 revises provisions related to gaming. BDR 3-1023 revises provisions relating to orders for protection against domestic violence. BDR S-1027 directs the Advisory Commission on the Administration of Justice to appoint a subcommittee to study records of criminal history. BDR 43-1030 revises provisions governing certain crimes. And last, we have BDR 14-1033 revises provisions relating to public safety. So at this time, I take a motion to introduce these 7 BDRs.
Move to approve, Mr. Chair.
So I have a motion from Assemblyman Wheeler, a second from Vice Chair Wynn. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing no discussion, Madam Secretary, would you please do a roll call vote?
Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Cohen.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Gonzalez. Assemblywoman Hanson.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Hardy,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Kasama,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Krasner,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Marzola,
Yes.
Assemblyman Miller,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Wynne,
Yes.
Assemblyman O'Neill, Assemblyman Orentlicker,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong,
Yes.
Assemblyman Wheeler,
Yes.
Chairman Yeager.
Yes, and I just wanted to ask for the record, I didn't hear a response from Assemblywoman Gonzalez. So Assemblywoman, were you a yes or a no on that motion?
Yes, sorry. I don't think I heard my name. Apologies. I'm a yes.
Okay, thank you so much. So the motion does carry. Everyone present voted in favor of it. Thank you, committee. Those will get introduced on the floor today, and we'll get some additional bills. Now, I will tell you, we are still waiting on a few BDRs, so there's a possibility that we'll get some more during today's meeting, or if not, likely later today or tomorrow. With that order of business behind us, we can move on to our agenda. And just so everyone knows kind of where we're going to take the bills in reverse order in the sense that we're going to do the first bill listed on the agenda last, but we're going to do the other three bills at the same time, because if you've read those bills, and hopefully you have, you notice that they are all identical. So at this time, I'm going to open the hearing on three bills, and I'm going to open the hearing on Assembly Bill 234, Assembly Bill 285, and Assembly Bill 293. All three of those bills revise provisions related to charitable lotteries. We have our own Assemblyman Wheeler here today to present, as well as Assemblyman Levitt. And Assemblyman Ellison is the sponsor of one of those measures, but he is presenting in another committee. So I think Assemblyman Wheeler is going to do his part today. So we're going to give them a chance to do their presentation. Then I'm sure we'll have some questions and we'll take some testimony. So welcome to the virtual presentation table. And Assemblyman Wheeler, I believe we were going to start with you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate it. As you said, Assemblyman Ellison is in Government Affairs, I believe, presenting a bill. So I'll be giving his remarks as well. Again, for the record, my name is Jim Wheeler. I represented Assembly District 39. And today I'd like to present for your consideration Assembly Bill 293, which kind of presents the other bills as well. You can tell how important these bills were as we just tripled up on them. So thank you for your charity today in listening to us. And I say charity because I think the following example, or actually, let me back up. 30 years ago, the Nevada Legislature enacted laws which require the Gaming Control Board to regulate charitable lotteries and gaming. During the last session, the laws were amended with Assembly Bill 117 with the intention to allow increased fundraising activities and to streamline the approval process for nonprofits. But before 2019, a nonprofit organization was not required to register with the Gaming Control Board if the total value of prizes was less than $2,500 and the organization operated no more than 2 charitable lotteries per year, as long as the tickets were sold to members and to their guests during the special event, and prizes didn't exceed $15,000 in a calendar year. Currently, the requirements affecting any organization doing fundraising with a raffle or any game that involved an element of chance. While this may not pose a major challenge in the community, donation efforts for professional sports organizations or large nonprofits that have scheduled fundraising events each year, it does become problematic for the smaller entities like 4-H club, Little League baseball team, high school football, veterans or disability groups that need to raise money on the fly for unanticipated needs. It's also become cumbersome and time insensitive for smaller organizations to register every time they choose to schedule a little fundraising event or a raffle or something like that. And just so everybody knows, I've got one group in Gardnerville that are octogenarian wine tasters, and they like to do their little raffle once a year, and they can't do it anymore. And if we don't pass these, I'm going to turn them loose on you, because they have been all over me so to try to get this changed. So I'd like to summarize the bill. Assembly Bill 293, as well as the other two, it reinstates the ability for people to make a small wager on a game of chance. with the money designated to go toward a charitable cause within the community. An organization is not required to register with the Gaming Control Board as long as the total value of the prize offered doesn't exceed $2,500 and the organization does not operate more than 2 lotteries per calendar year, or the tickets for the lottery are sold only to, or when the tickets, I should say, are sold only to members and their guests for a special event sponsored by the organization, and total value of all the prizes offered during the calendar years do not exceed $15,000. So this concludes my portion of the presentation for Bill 293, and I strongly encourage your support for the bill. I'd like to give you, and I'd like to read for you some comments from Assemblyman Ellison on his bill, Assembly Bill 234, if that's okay, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. And I'll read these for you. It said, I think the following example is one of the best arguments for supporting Assembly Bill 234, along with the other two bills. Friends for Life is a small community group in Elko, Nevada that assists friends and neighbors who experience hardships created by serious medical conditions. They have been hard at work for the last 25 years raising funds for individuals in Elko County and for the surrounding community. One of their original fundraisers was in 1998 to help a resident paralyzed in a rodeo accident, help him gather enough money to purchase an adaptive van and a computer with assisted technology. It took the group 11 years, but they eventually raised $34,000 for the van. Last year, Friends for Life was working to raise funds again for additional adaptive equipment, but they ran into difficulties because of Assembly Bill 117 from the last session, and they weren't able to raise any funds. Friends for Life has several small fundraisers through the course of the year, but many of them in the past have been raffles. And with Assembly Bill 117, they haven't been able to do those anymore. So that is Assemblyman Ellison, and I stand ready for questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Assemblyman Wheeler, and appreciate you pinch hitting for Assemblyman Ellison this morning. We also have Assemblyman Levitt with us, so I want to hand it over to him to make some remarks, and then we'll have a chance for questions. Welcome to Assembly Judiciary Committee, Assemblyman Levitt, and please proceed.
Thank you, Chair Yeager. Members of the committee, for the record, I'm Assemblyman Glenn Levitt, Assembly District 23. As we heard from Assemblyman Wheeler, amendments made to NRS 462 inadvertently caused some headaches for some smaller charitable organizations. And this bill is just trying to resolve some of those hurdles that organizations have. This bill was brought to me by a small group that was unable to do their raffle at their luncheon, and I read NRS 462, and I said, well, I don't know if you can do it or not. It's not real clear, and so I think these bills kind of make it clear what they can and can't do. These ladies didn't want to break the law and didn't want to try to interpret the law in chance that they may be breaking it. So, and another thing I asked them is how much do you raise per year? What's your end goal? And they told me if they could raise $1,200 in a calendar year, they were super happy. And I didn't want them to not have that ability, as their membership is small, and so through their dues and through their small luncheons, they weren't able to raise enough money to both operate and do some of the things that they want to do. Other than that, Assemblyman Wheeler and Assemblyman Ellison, through their remarks, were pretty clear on what the bill does and what it will accomplish. So I'll end my presentation there as not belabor the point. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Assemblyman Levitt and Assemblyman Wheeler. I think now would be the time for questions. I have a couple right out the gate that I've been informed about, so we'll start with Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod, and then we'll go to Vice Chair Wynn.
Thank you, Chair. So I had a question about Section 1, Sub 1C. So it says the tickets or chance for the charitable lottery are sold only to members of the organization and guests to those members while attending a special event. So I'm just worried that this language might be too limiting for, say, the example that you shared for Assemblyman Ellison and his Friends for Life. I don't think that they had a special event. They were trying to raise money. And I know a lot of these smaller charities might have something going on for, a period of time. And I'm just wondering if that language is just a little too specific for a space, because I'm reading this like when they do, a pot of gold type thing at an event, but I'm just wondering if this won't allow charities to do, still a small amount under the 15,000 or under the 2,500, as you mentioned, but something that might go on, not in perpetuity, but maybe for a couple weeks or something like that.
Who would you like to answer that, Mr. Chairman?
Assemblyman Wheeler, we could start with you, and then if Assemblyman Levitt wants to add anything, we can go that direction.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Assemblywoman, I think you're absolutely correct, and I did see that in the bills when they first came out. I did not want to send my bill back or rewrite because we may be here in July if that happens. And so I did see that, and I was kind of hoping someone would bring it up. Because I was going to in my closing remarks and say, maybe we need to change this, because what happens a lot of times is they may hold a raffle, a church organization or 4-H or somebody, and sell those tickets to people outside and then award the prize at the event. And sometimes, the people aren't there to pick the prize up. So I do think we need to clear that language up. And I'd like to work with the vice chair to clear that language up because she loves working with me so much.
Just quick follow-up.
Please go ahead.
And while you're at it, so I would also clean up the language about that it has to be someone attending that event or to a guest. So, because, if you want to sell a raffle ticket to grandma and grandma's not coming. So just since you're already willing to look at that section, I do think that needs a little cleanup. Thank you.
I agree with you. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go next to Vice Chair Nguyen.
Thank you, Chair Yeager, and thank you for the presentation of AB 234, 285, and 293. First of all, I'm wondering, do we have to pick which one? I'm leaning towards AB 285. But I do have a couple of questions. I get what your intent is. But is this something that you've had, either the three of you, it can go to anyone, have spoken with the Gaming Control Board about their thoughts on the proposed change to the law? That's my first question, and then I'll have a follow-up.
I can tell you for myself that I did about, I guess it's been almost 2 years ago when this first hit, and one of the clubs in my neighborhood said, hey, all of a sudden we can't do this. So I called the Gaming Control Board, and they said, yeah, you're right. That was an unintended consequence of AB 117 from the last session. And so we decided at that time, well, we'll just have to go in and fix it in the next session. I called the governor and asked for a special session, but he just didn't. So we decided we'd fix it in this session, and that was the outcome.
Assemblyman Levitt. Please go ahead, Assemblyman Levitt.
Yeah, I have not talked to the Gaming Control Board. I thought my interpretation of it was just vague language that needed some interpretation, and that's where we were at. And I do agree with Assemblywoman when 285 really is the best bill out of the three identical bills.
Here's my follow-up question. We were talking about, obviously this would be smaller organizations, and I've had people contact me from churches, my family's own church organization, other people how can we do this? Are we breaking the law? What are we doing? So I appreciate you guys bringing it and having this kind of conversation. But on the flip side, I know that sometimes with these smaller organizations, even with the octogenarians that are having their wine club, there can sometimes be drama. And what will happen if there's no like way to register with a gaming control board or some sort of regulatory authority? If someone feels like they're cheated or some like organization is rigging some sort of like thing, just kind of going to that kind of scenario. And they do, in fact, try to complain to the gaming control board. Who will investigate or who will look in that or who will protect any kind of like instances of fraud or anything like that? Do you have any ideas on how that might happen?
Madam Vice Chair, I don't know how they do it in Las Vegas. Up here, we just shoot it out. So you know, this are the rurals. No, I am just kidding for the record. But I believe that would be a civil suit at that point, and it would obviously go to small claims court because of the amount. So that would be my take on it right off the top of my head. I don't know if Assemblyman Levitt would have anything else to add to that.
I don't really have anything to add in that specific realm. I just know that the organizations that I talk to are so small, and they're trying to just raise such a small amount of money that this is just trying to help small organizations, and they have not yet and said that there was any disputes in the many years that they were doing this previously.
And Chair Yeager, I just have one last question, if that's okay.
Please go ahead.
How did you come up with that dollar amount?
It was pretty darn arbitrary, but we did. I know for mine, when I originally put it in 2 years ago, or almost 2 years ago, I had talked to a couple of different organizations in my district, and they said they never go over, $15,000 a year or $10,000 a year. And prizes are usually donated, so they're under $2,500 a year. But a lot of them are, for instance, they'll have a what they call a 50-50 at a woman's luncheon, where you put $1 in, and whoever gets their ticket drawn gets 50 cents on the dollar back, and the other half goes to the organization. So we're talking a few $100s in most cases.
Go ahead, Assemblyman Levitt.
Sorry, Chair Yeager. Glenn Levitt, Assembly District 23 for the record. I do agree with that assessment. It was arbitrary, but not arbitrary, as we wanted to keep the dollar amount low as to not go beyond the scope of the Gaming Control Board in some way, shape, or form, but also allow these organizations to do what they need to do for their little organization and their little fundraising efforts.
Okay, we'll go next to Assemblyman Ohrenlicker.
Thank you, Chair, and David Orntlicker for the record, Assembly District 20. Thank you for bringing this bill forward. My one question has to do with a different issue about setting the amounts at $2,500 and $15,000, and that may be the right amount for today, but it may not be the right amount in 2 years or 4 years. So I'd hate to have to come back to tweak it every time that we realize the numbers aren't quite right. Is there a way to give the Game Control Board some discretion to adjust as need be, so changes don't have to be done through a legislation?
Assemblyman Wheeler for the record. Assemblyman, I think that's a great idea. It's not something that ever even crossed my mind. I don't know about Assemblyman Levitt, but I'm sure that it could be attached to a CPI. It could be attached to something, and allow it to change in regulation instead of in law.
Yeah, I'm okay with that concept. Other than these particular bills kind of take it out of the purview of the Gaming Control Board. So I don't know how we reintegrate that in without having to register with them every time that they want to do a raffle at a luncheon.
Do we have other questions from committee members? If you could raise your hand if you have a question. Okay, I'm not seeing additional questions at this time. So Assemblyman Wheeler, Assemblyman Levitt, thank you for presenting. We'll ask you to just sit tight for a moment while we take some testimony, and then we'll come back to you for concluding remarks. At this time, I'm going to open it up for testimony in support of the three bills that we are hearing. I don't think we have anyone with us on the Zoom who is here for these bills, but BPS, could we go to the phone lines to see if there's anybody there in support?
Thank you and good morning, Chair. To offer testimony in support of these bills, press *9 now to take your place in the queue. And we will begin with the caller with the last three digits of 037. Caller with the last three digits of 037. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Tanya Brown, TONJABROWN. I'd like to thank the sponsors for bringing these bills forward. I concur with what the other callers have stated. There was a lot of good questions raised. I know I would just like to mention that a lot of people don't know this about me, my personal life, other than, the advocates for the inmates and the innocent. But I have sat on the board of the Last Response Memorial Fund. That was set up shortly after the death of Carson City Deputy Sheriff Carl Howell. I have sat on the Gold Star Families Board for some years. I have sat on the Fallen Soldiers Memorial Wall Project, and I have sat on the Nevada's Children Memorial Fund. That this memorial was dedicated to all the children in Nevada who had been slain by others. And I don't know if you've actually ever seen that memorial, but I had that one placed on the Capitol ground, and I would ask that you go and take a look at it. It's a beautiful memorial established. And of course, we worked on the memorial for the memorial wall that's now been placed on the Capitol ground. As a board member, we have come across some of these issues, and it kind of hindered our fundraising events. So we definitely support this. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Brown, and thank you for your civic engagement and charitable causes. Certainly appreciate that. BPS, are there additional callers in support?
Yes, Chair. Our next caller with the last three digits of 859. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning. This is Janine Hansen, JANINEHANSEN. I'm the state chairman of the Independent American Party, and we are in support of these charitable lottery bills. I'm especially happy to support my own Assemblyman John Ellison's bill as well as the other identical bills. The State Independent American Party has in past years sponsored raffles to raise money. These were instituted by our former state chairman, John Wagner. The raffles helped us to pay for our state conventions and state central committee meetings. These raffles were significant to us, a minor party, to provide money to pay for speakers at our meetings and other meeting expenses. We appreciated today the concerns expressed by Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod about the limiting of the raffles only during special events and only to members or guests attending the event. We have often sold our tickets in advance of the actual meeting to friends and supporters. So we appreciate the Assemblywoman's concerns and hope that the bill can be amended accordingly. Our prizes have never exceeded $2,500, and we have never raised $15,000 in a single year with raffles. So our efforts are limited. We appreciate the consideration of these bills and hope that you'll pass them, especially with the concerns of the Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Hansen. BPS, let's take the next caller in support, please.
Thank you. With the caller with the last three digits of 105, slowly state and then spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning. My name is Lynn Chapman, LYNNCHAPMAN. I'm 10 times past president of the American Legion Auxiliary, Doobie Reed Unit 30 in Sparks, Nevada. We support all three of these bills. We are an organization that has been around for over 100 years. Our main concern is veterans and their families. We raise money for all the programs we have in place to help our veterans and their families, as well as to help build character in the next generation. We raise money for Wreaths Across America, the Fernley Cemetery Support Group, Child Welfare, Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts, JROTC and the Rifle Teams, Buddy Packs, and other needs for the VA Hospital, for Chaplains Program, Fisher House, VA Guest House of Reno. We sponsor Girls for Girl State and help pay for the Girl State program, and also scholarships for veterans and their families. We also supported the Veterans Memorial at the Sparks Marina. Under child welfare, we raised $250 towards a new flagpole for the Sparks High School. We also help in emergencies around America when any disaster strikes. And we just want to have raffles to be able to raise what little money we can, money for those and other projects that we do to help Nevada families in our community. We would like to thank everyone for the questions. They were great questions and really helped to focus in on what we need to do. But please help these organizations. We don't have a lot of money, but this is our way of being able to raise money to help in our own communities. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Chapman. BPS, if there are other callers in support, let's take the next one, please.
To offer testimony in support, press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no more callers wishing to offer testimony in support at this time.
Thank you, BPS. Before I close supportive testimony, I'll note for members of the committee and members of the public, there are some additional letters of support that have been uploaded to Nellis under the Exhibit tab. We have a letter of support from the United Veterans Legislative Council, and that is in 3 different letters referencing each of the 3 bills. And then we also have a letter in support from the Reno Problem Gaming Center, Denise Quirk. I'm just going to pull that up really quickly to make sure that I'm accurately stating that it's a letter of support. Well, I think it's probably a neutral letter. It looks like there's a proposal for some sort of amendment, so I don't want to characterize that as support. That's how it's listed on Nellis, but we may make a correction to that. It seems to be more of a request, not relating to the actual text of the bill. So I'll just reference that for members if you would like to read that. So at this time, I'll close testimony in support. I will now open it up for testimony in opposition. I don't think we have anyone on the Zoom with us who'd like to testify in opposition. BPS, let's please go to the phone lines and see if there's anybody there in opposition.
To testify in opposition of these bills, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, at this time, there are no callers wishing to offer opposition.
Thank you, BPS. I will close opposition testimony. I will now open neutral testimony. Again, I don't think there's anyone on the Zoom joining us who would like to testify on these 3 bills in neutral. BPS, let's go to the phone lines and see if there's anybody there in the neutral position.
To provide neutral testimony on these bills, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. And we will begin with our first caller with the last 3 digits of 0800. That's caller with the last 3 digits of 800. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself. Then state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin now.
Good morning, everyone. For the record, my name is Terry, Terri. My last name is Hendry, Hendry, and I'm the Communications Director for the Nevada Department of Veterans Services, and I'm here today to testify in the neutral position. I'm also here to share with the committee that this issue was among the 35 issues identified by the Nevada State veterans organizations across the state as worthy of consideration during the 2020 Veterans Legislative Symposia. Excuse me. During this symposia, these veterans stated that they wanted lawmakers to consider changing NRS 462 and GCB Regulation 4A, believing these regulations severely curtail fundraising activities for many local groups who raise money to support local veteran activities. And that's all I have, Chairman Yeager and members of this committee. Thank you for this opportunity to provide this testimony.
Thank you for your testimony in neutral, Ms. Hendry. BPS, are there other callers in the neutral position?
To provide neutral testimony, press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no more callers in the queue at this time.
Thank you, BPS. I'll close neutral testimony. Having heard the testimony, I'll hand it back to Assemblyman Wheeler and then Assemblyman Levitt to make any concluding remarks on the 3 bills that we are considering.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just love it when there's no opposition to a bill. So in the remarks that were prepared for me by constituent services, the first line was, "This is a pretty simple bill." As you can see, I did not go there and was not going to. So it turned out that it was. So I thank you very much for your time. If anyone has any questions on any of the bills, please just give me a call or shoot me an email. Be happy to take in any suggestions. And I would like to make a conceptual amendment about the other assemblyman's comments. And so I think we can just go ahead and work session it right now. What do you think, Chair?
Not quite yet, but thank you for the suggestion, Assemblyman Wheeler. Assemblyman Levitt, would you like to make any concluding remarks?
Just thank you for hearing this bill. We think it's important for little organizations to do their operations and appreciate the consideration and agree with the amendment put forth by, or the amendment suggestion put forth by Assemblywoman Wilbur Axelrod. So I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Assemblyman Wheeler, Assemblyman Levitt. Appreciate your time here this morning and hope you, Assemblyman Levitt, have a great rest of the day. And of course, Assemblyman Wheeler will be sticking with us through the next bill hearing. So with that behind us, I'm going to close the bill hearing on Assembly Bill 234, Assembly Bill 285, and Assembly Bill 293. And that's going to take us to the first bill that is listed on our agenda. So I'm now going to formally open the hearing on Assembly Bill 10. Assembly Bill 10 revises provisions relating to vehicular manslaughter. Before I turn that presentation over to our presenters, I will let members of the committee, members of the public know that there is a proposed amendment from the City of North Las Vegas that can be found on Nellis under the Exhibit tab. And as you can see, looks like we have a team of folks from the City of North Las Vegas joining us via Zoom. So I'm not sure who's going to present, but would just ask that before you speak, you make sure you state your name for the record. We'll give you a chance to present, and I'm sure we'll have some questions. Welcome, and please go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Yeager and members of the committee. My name is Marissa Rodriguez. I'm a Senior Deputy City Attorney with the City of North Las Vegas. And here with me are fellow colleagues from the City Attorney's Office and Government Affairs Director Jared Luke that will be answering questions at the end of the presentation. We also have another colleague appearing from his home office, Andy Moore. And thank you so much for taking the time this morning to hear about our presentation on Assembly Bill 10. Assembly Bill 10 seeks to fill a gap in the penalty options when someone kills another person because of their careless or reckless driving. Currently under the law, there are only 2 options. And that is, on the one end of the spectrum, you have a B felony when someone is convicted of reckless driving, which carries a 1 to 6 years penalty in prison. On the other end of the spectrum, you have a misdemeanor, which is for people who are convicted of vehicular manslaughter. We don't have anything in between. And SB 10 is seeking to bring justice to the victims, to the families of those who have lost a loved one because someone was careless while driving. They choose to use their phone when they know that they are close to a school zone and when other factors merit something higher than a misdemeanor. Now, before I go into the substance of the presentation, we have prepared a PowerPoint, and I think that we need to be given presenter options.
We can present it locally.
Okay.
If
you give me 1 second.
This is broadcast who should be able to share that directly, but I will assist should any issues come up.
Thank you. If you would just please indulge me for a second. Before I go into the substance of the bill, I would like to tell you about a tragic incident that is the impetus for this bill. It's a tragedy that happened to two beautiful children in our city of North Las Vegas, Alexander Bush, who was 12 years old at the time, and Charlotte Bush, who was 9 years old on the day of the incident. So last year on February 14th, as both siblings were walking home after school, they were struck by a truck driven by Mark Klein. Now, here are the facts of that particular case. The two children were walking on a marked crosswalk shortly after school. I think the incident happened around 2:45, but it was before 3. And it was really close to the school. Mr. Klein was familiar with the road. He lived in that neighborhood. In fact, he admitted that the reason he took that road was to avoid the school zone, although this was still close to the school. He was familiar with the road. He knew that he was driving a big truck with a massive grill. He admitted that he had consumed a beer before the incident. And he also admitted that he was looking at his phone when he struck both children. Unfortunately, Alexander passed away a couple of days after the incident. And Charlotte suffered severe and very serious disabilities that to this day require around-the-clock medical care. In fact, the parents of these children had to move out of state to provide the medical care that she needs. The case was sent to the DA's office for review. Unfortunately, the law, as it's written right now, it would only allow them to prosecute this as a Category B felony. But the facts didn't fall into that category, and they sent it back to our criminal division at the city, where we are limited by law to only charge this as a misdemeanor. And in fact, that is what happened. Here on the next slide, I have the various charges against Mr. Klein, and ultimately he was sentenced to a misdemeanor. And Mr. and Mrs. Bush do not think this is justice for what happened to their family. And that is the only thing that we could do, even though this was not just a regular person who briefly looked away. The facts of this case, in their mind, in the mind of the city, merited something higher than a misdemeanor. Now, the actual language of the bill, this is the amended version that Chairman Yeager mentioned, would seek to amend NRS 484B.657. This is the statute that addresses vehicular manslaughter. So basically, when someone is convicted of killing someone because of their negligent driving, the prosecutors would have the option of, one, prosecuting the incident as a misdemeanor, or where the facts are so egregious, like in this case, it could also be prosecuted as a gross misdemeanor. So it would provide options. And that's it. That's the amendment to the NRS that AB 10 would bring. I would like to, I also listed for the committee's benefit a handful of other states that currently have laws that are similar to what AB 10 proposes. we did this to show you that we are not trailblazers here. We are not the first ones to do this. This is something that other states are doing. In fact, there are other jurisdictions that have harsher penalties, but we didn't list those because it didn't apply to AB 10 here. Now, aside from bringing justice to the family, to the Bush family and other families who will find themselves in that situation, the city of North Las Vegas cares about this issue because unfortunately, the number of pedestrians who are hit by cars and die has been increasing. According to a report that we attached with the PowerPoint that we provided, nationwide, the number of people who are hit while walking has increased by 45% over the last decade. And that increase is not distributed evenly across the board. Unfortunately, minorities end up being the victims of these incidents. In fact, according to the same report, Black Americans are struck and killed by drivers at a much, much higher rate than white non-Hispanic Americans. The same thing happens when you look at low-income neighborhoods. People in lower-income neighborhoods are hit by a car twice as often as those people who live in a middle-income neighborhood, and 3 times more than people who live in a higher-income neighborhood. And of course, this happens because people in lower incomes tend to, at higher rates, not own a car. They need to walk, they need to take public transportation, and this exposes them to distracted drivers. And in fact, nationwide, we rank 11th as the deadliest state for pedestrians, which is not a good number. So that is why it is important for the city that we address this, so that when we unfortunately have to deal with this issue, there is justice that can be brought for the family, the victims of the family. Now, the Bush family was hoping to co-present with us today. There were a number of reasons where we couldn't be here, but one of them is because their daughter is currently undergoing therapy. In lieu of that, they sent a statement that my colleague, Rianne, is going to read for the record.
And before we do that, could I just ask, could you stop sharing your screen so we can hopefully see a larger picture of who's reading? Okay, fantastic. Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Rodriguez, and I'll hand it over for the reading of that statement as well to whoever is going to do that.
Thank you, Chairman Yeager, members of the committee. My name is Rianne Jarvis Denman. That's RHIANN, Jarvis Denman. I'm a deputy city attorney with the city attorney's office here in North Las Vegas. I'm going to read a statement from Aaron Bush, who is the father of the 2 children who were hit. Our kids were taken from us on Valentine's Day. I saw them laying in the street. When you see it, you know. You just know. I remember seeing the ambulances and paramedics working on Alex in the middle of the asphalt when I arrived on the scene. His eyes were open, his mouth hanging open, blood on his face. Paramedics doing chest compressions while he laid there limp and lifeless on the ground. Charlotte had been pulled to the side of the road and was lying next to a parked car. She just looked like she was asleep. Most nights, these are the images that flash through my mind when I'm falling asleep. Since they were able to resuscitate Alex on the scene, he was technically alive when he got to the hospital. Given their protocols, they had to give him 48 hours before they could declare him legally dead. They finally declared him legally dead on February 16th, but I know that he was gone on the 14th. We made the decision for him to be an organ donor. So as soon as they declared him and we gave the final word, the hospital began procedures to keep his organs alive in his body until they could be removed for donation. He laid there in a hospital bed, dead for 2 days. Alex was a hockey player, a goalie, beloved by his teammates at all of the ice rinks in town. He was so proud that he was number 29 for his junior Vegas Golden Knights House League hockey team, wearing his hero's number, playing on his hero's ice at City National Arena. He loved that he was one of only a couple male flute players in his school band, and he was so proud that he was the top fundraiser in his class for his school band and that his efforts got his class that pizza party. He loved to play video games, build Legos, draw Pokemon, and text his friends. He loved helping people. His teachers told us that he would talk to kids that he'd seen getting bullied at schools and would immediately befriend them so that they would feel better. His love for helping people is why we decided to make him an organ donor. He would be so proud if he knew that other people's lives are better because of him. He loved to hug. He gave the best hugs. His hugs were so warm and genuinely full of love. I'll never know another hug like the ones I would get from my son because he's gone, all because of one man and his phone. It's time for a change. And now I come to Charlotte. She's alive. That's what the doctors set out to do when my kids were brought to UMC Trauma after they were hit by a 5,000-pound truck driving 30 miles per hour. She's alive, but she's not living. She'll never be the smart, sassy, artistic, dancing fashionista that she had made out of herself in her short 9 years. She's not walking. She's not talking. She can't move. We haven't managed to establish any kind of repetitive, reliable communication with her. She still gets all of her medication, formula, and water through a tube inserted through her stomach. To quote one of her favorite songs, it's likely that she's never going to dance again. All of this because of one man on his phone. Thank you. We'd now like to close our presentation and open up for questions.
And, Marissa Rodriguez, for the record, I know that the family was trying to connect. Do we know if they were able to connect?
So thank you for your presentation, and certainly want to acknowledge and thank the Bush family for sending that statement in. Members of the committee, that statement is up on Nellis if you would like to read it. And as a committee, we certainly send our deepest sympathies to the Bush family about what happened. It's an unimaginable tragedy, and certainly send our thoughts and prayers. Before we move on to questions, I just did want to ask for the record, for the folks who are presenting from City of North Las Vegas, I think we only had Mr. Luke actually sign in on the legislature's website. So if after the meeting, those of you who also presented or are going to answer questions, if you could go to the website and just sign in, that'll help our committee secretaries with the minutes, and it'll help keep an accurate record of who was in attendance here today. So hopefully Mr. Luke can walk you through that. It's a really simple process, but would ask if you could all do that. And I just want to confirm, Ms. Rodriguez, that there isn't anything additional for the presentation and that you are now available for questions.
There isn't anything additional for the presentation other than 2 articles that we submitted with the PowerPoint presentation for the committee's review.
Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. And I will note that for the record, under the exhibit tab on Nellis, there are a number of exhibits for this bill. One was the presentation that we just saw, the PowerPoint presentation. The other one was the statement that was read. And then we do have a couple of additional studies related to pedestrian deaths and texting and driving. And there's also a letter of support that I'm sure we'll get to when we get to supportive testimony. So again, I want to thank you for your presentation. And now would be the time for questions. I believe we're going to start with Vice Chair Nguyen, who has a couple questions, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you for your presentation, and thank you to the Bush family for being willing to share your story. I know that in my practice as a criminal defense attorney, and I know in working with city attorneys across the state, and especially in Southern Nevada, where I've seen this. I know that these are some of the more difficult cases that you have to deal with. A lot of times, because I don't think people realize, and can you clarify, vehicular manslaughter under NRS 484B.657, if you're looking at the bill on line 6 on page 1, this is simple negligence. It's not negligent or not recklessness. Isn't that correct?
Marissa Rodriguez for the record. Thank you for that question, Assemblywoman. Yes, this would apply to negligence, not reckless negligence. We have a different statute that addresses that, but this would not negligent, not every conduct that is deemed negligent is as egregious. There are a number of factors that contribute to someone's conduct that, if they are found to be guilty of committing vehicular manslaughter, not every incident will have the same facts. So with this amendment, we are hoping to provide options so that the prosecutor can determine whether to charge it as a misdemeanor at the city level, or where it can be charged as a gross misdemeanor, where the facts are so egregious, like in this case.
And under this, it's simple negligence. And you said that, and I'm aware that there is reckless vehicular homicide. Is that correct? And that's a felony.
Yes, that's correct.
And so that would be if you had multiple acts of simple negligence that would lead to that. Isn't that correct?
Well, would you like to, Assemblywoman, we have a couple of colleagues.
Hold on one second. Could you just please remember to state your name each time before you speak?
Yes.
My apologies, Marissa Rodriguez, and I would like to have one of my colleagues from the criminal division answer your questions, Assemblywoman.
My name is James J. Smedley, James Smedley, Smedley, Deputy City Attorney, Criminal Division. Thank you for that question. And yes, vehicular manslaughter addresses conduct that rises to simple negligence, negligent conduct. Not all negligent conduct, but the statute essentially says if you're operating your vehicle in a certain manner by doing certain things that rises to the level of negligent conduct and you kill somebody, then there's going to be a consequence. And as the statute currently stands before this amendment, it is a simple misdemeanor punishable by 6 months of jail or less. That's the maximum. I think the impetus of what we're trying to do here is that, yes, there are other statutes out there that address different kind of conduct, right? And if you cut a line right down the middle, and where I think your question appropriately cuts the line is, as the issue is, what if somebody does something on purpose, and what if somebody does something on accident? And there are statutes out there that essentially say if you kill somebody with intentional conduct, the consequences are worse. In certain situations, your intentional conduct might rise to the level of recklessness, and if you kill somebody or hurt somebody, that's a felony. The impetus of what we're trying to do here is we've asked the question, okay, yes, in the context where you have negligent conduct, it's already been criminalized. Well, what we're doing here is not trying to create something new. We're not asking you to make something negligent that wasn't criminalized before criminal now. What we're saying is it's already been criminalized by the legislature. The legislature's already said if you accidentally kill somebody with negligent conduct, that's a crime. We're going to call it vehicular manslaughter. What we're trying to say is in these municipalities like ours, where part of what we have to do is protect the public interest, what greater harm can somebody cause than the death of another human being? And where you've caused the death of another human being in a negligent manner that has already been deemed to be criminal, can we take the penalty in the interest of justice for the victims, the surviving members, and say 6 months isn't enough, a year is better? And that is the fundamental principle that we are trying to aim at here with what we're doing. because we have to look at these families like the Bush family and tell them, yes, your 12-year-old and your 9-year-old are dead for crossing the street in a crosswalk after school on a bright sunny day, having done absolutely nothing wrong. And they were struck down by somebody who did something that wasn't reckless, that wasn't felony punishable, that wasn't an intentional act, but it is a negligent act that's already been criminalized. And now we have to look at that family and say the maximum consequence we could possibly get if lightning strikes, all of the 26 witnesses show up, your family is able to come and testify, everybody shows up, everybody testifies, the 3 or 4 or 5 day trial happens, all of that comes down, a jury verdict, a bench verdict comes down, he's found guilty. The worst we can ask for in this circumstance is 6 months jail. If he would have mowed over a family of 10, the worst we could have asked for is 6 months jail. If he would have mowed down 22 people, the worst we could have asked for is 6 months jail under the statute the way that it's written. And so what we're asking is, in a circumstance like this, for all kinds of reasons, justice, principle, supporting the victims of the remaining family members, is it too much to ask for a raise of the penalty in a circumstance from 6 months to 12 months? What that would do is it would raise it to the level of a gross misdemeanor. That would make it a situation where instead of a bench trial, instead of a judge who technically is uninterested in the case, now this person will be tried by a jury of their peers. Let the citizenry decide what's the appropriate punishment for mowing down another member of the municipality.
Well, if I could just interrupt there briefly, and we can consult with legal. Juries in our state do not sentence people. And in fact, they are specifically under statute directed not to consider, and they are not to consider a sentence. So, I just want to make sure that we're not putting something on the record that isn't something that happens in our state. So I don't know if there's anyone from legal that can confirm that, but.
The Vice Chair, that's a fair statement. I appreciate that. At the end. Oh yeah, James Smedley, Deputy City Attorney. That's a fair point. But I apologize for my emotional investment in this case. But at the end of the day, that is what we're asking you to do. And your question goes directly to the heart of it. If it's negligent conduct, that's different than intentional conduct, and that is absolutely true. And so then the philosophical question becomes, what is an appropriate punishment for that? How much jail time is too much jail time? How much jail time potentially is not enough jail time? And so at the end of the day, we're asking for that increase from 6 months to a year. And the only way that can happen under the state of the law is to recharacterize the offense from a misdemeanor to a gross misdemeanor. And that is essentially where it is.
Well, Rochelle Lynn, for the record, I think you misunderstood my statement. It's my understanding that we actually do already have an existing statute, kind of laws that, address simple negligence, reckless negligence, and like intentional conduct. Like, for example, if you kill someone while you are drinking, that is a felony, and people routinely are sentenced to 8 to 20 years. And that is a very different circumstance than someone who's going maybe 5 miles over the speed limit and unintentionally and accidentally hit someone. I recognize the tragedy that people are lost on our roadways, and I'm just hesitant to expand what we've been doing in our state just seemingly arbitrarily up to a year. And that kind of brings me to the amendment that you have that kind of makes this wobbler kind of like language about whether or not it can be a misdemeanor or a gross misdemeanor. We don't really have like jurisdictional like statutes that can be treated like a misdemeanor or a gross misdemeanor, because as you know, that makes the difference between whether or not like your office would prosecute it if it was a misdemeanor, or whether or not like a district attorney's office would prosecute it if it was a gross misdemeanor. So I'm wondering how that like works in law. Like, how do you determine who makes that jurisdictional call? Like, if a police officer that respond to like a death, a traffic death, do they submit both of that documentation to the district attorney's office and the city attorney's office, and then you guys fight over who gets it? Who decides? It's still simple negligence. So who makes that determination on what it's I mean, if it's simple negligence, it's simple negligence. So I don't understand how it's a gross misdemeanor in one and a misdemeanor in the other when it's the same exact conduct. So I'm curious how that works jurisdictionally, or how you intended that to work jurisdictionally.
Thank you for that question, Assemblywoman. Marissa Rodriguez for the record. It would be fact specific. Not every incident is the same. For example, with the Bush children, there were a number of factors that the conduct of Mr. Klein, driving close to a school when he knew that it was close to when children got out of school, in a road where there's a marked crosswalk, where he had a beer, where he was driving a big truck with this grill, where he was looking at his phone. So it would be case specific. If the facts of a particular case are so egregious, then the case would be submitted for the DA for review. They would have the option of whether or not to prosecute this as a gross misdemeanor. If they decline to prosecute the matter, just like they review other matters that are sent to them to prosecute as a B felony, for example, for reckless driving, if they decline, if they don't believe that the facts are there that merit a gross misdemeanor, they would send that case back to the city, and the city would then make its determination. The prosecutors would review and determine whether or not to prosecute as a misdemeanor.
Thank you for that answer. I'm still not really sure how that works, because right now it's my understanding, like in your circumstance with the Bush family, and this, I mean, it's just tragic. These are horrible cases, and they're horrible circumstances. But when you're looking at like some of these factors, don't you have the ability to refer these cases over to like the district attorney's office to see whether or not they will contemplate charging this as a felony reckless vehicular, like the homicide case, where they could prosecute it? Or did this, the drinking, I realize probably having a big truck is not illegal or negligent in any way, but like the drinking, obviously that sounds like a problem. And the distracted driving, is it just a situation where you don't refer cases over that you feel like rise to that level where it's not a simple negligence? Or are they not taking them? Like where is the like problem with some of these existing problems that you're having with the cases that you're using as examples?
So Marissa Rodriguez for the record, we did submit this case to the DA's office, but again, they are limited by what the current law is. And if the facts don't rise to the level of a B felony, they are not able to prosecute as such. And so what we are seeking to do through AB 10 is to fill that gap, right? Right now you have either a misdemeanor or a B felony for reckless driving. This would allow to have some middle ground for those cases that, again, that are so egregious that don't rise to the level of reckless driving.
I'm just concerned with having that wobbler language between a misdemeanor and a gross misdemeanor, that maybe there needs to be like an additional like enumerated standard, if that's what you're trying to capture, is something that is above a simple negligence but is below a reckless like negligence. And I'm not even familiar if there's something in between, but I see what you're trying to accomplish, and I look forward to kind of looking at this more and speaking with legal about some of my jurisdictional concerns.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair Nguyen. Do we have additional questions? If you could raise your hand in front of your screen, let me know. We'll go to Assemblyman Orntlicker.
Thank you, Chair Yeager. David Orntlicker for the record, Assembly District 20. Just to reinforce what the Vice Chair has been saying, if there are these cases, because you talk about egregious cases that don't quite make it to reckless negligent conduct, but to expand to reach all simple negligence when you're just trying to reach a small number of cases seems like overkill. And it would be better, as Vice Chair suggested, to think about some tweaks that pick up this small category of cases at the outer edge of negligence, rather than picking up everything that counts as simple negligence.
And I'm not sure that there was a question there necessarily, but from our folks at City of North Las Vegas, I'll give you a chance to address that if you'd like.
Marissa Rodriguez for the record. Assemblyman, I don't know if you reviewed the amended version of AB 10, where we originally only added the word gross so that any vehicular manslaughter would be punishable as a gross misdemeanor. But now we've included we left the misdemeanor or gross misdemeanor. That way there is that range. And I don't know if that addresses your comment, but if not, we would be happy to consider, any amendments that you would think would be appropriate and to work with you for that.
Thank you.
Do we have additional questions from committee members on Assembly Bill 10? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised. Just give me 1 second. I wanted to take a look at something that was in the presentation and perhaps ask a question on it, but I want to make sure my information is accurate before I ask that. So yeah, I guess here was my question, and I'll just ask this because it was a slide in your presentation, and it was about the case that we were talking about, the obviously very tragic case. But when it came to the sentence, and I think the Vice Chair explained this, that in municipal court the sentence would be doled out by the municipal court judge after either a bench trial or a plea of guilty. But it looks like in this particular case the judge opted to impose a $2,000 fine, 200 hours of community service, traffic school victim impact panel, stay out of trouble for a year, and then 120 days of house arrest with a 60-day sentence. So I guess, and I don't want to ask you to speak for the judge because obviously you guys are not judicial officers, but it doesn't appear in this case, the judge had at his or her disposal 6 months in jail and opted to instead impose 120 days of house arrest. And, I don't want to say that house arrest is any walk in the park either, but it's certainly not the same as being in jail. And I just wondered if you sort of had any thoughts on that, because I think, the bill seeks to potentially allow 12 months in jail for a particular case. But in this case, which I think we can all agree is tragic and probably fairly egregious on the negligence level, the municipal court judge didn't choose to impose the maximum sentence. And I guess I just kind of wanted to ask about that and see if you had any thoughts on why the judge didn't do that in this particular case.
Thank you, Chairman Yeager. My name is Amanda Mateer, M-A-T-E-E-R. I am one of the deputy city attorneys for the criminal division here in North Las Vegas. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to answer that question. My colleague, James Medley, who's here, and I were two of the prosecutors who did handle that case. This case actually did not proceed to a bench trial. It was actually negotiated prior to that point in time between Mr. Klein, the defendant in the case, and his defense attorney. That was for several reasons. The primary one being that the Bush family has moved out of state to Ohio to give Charlotte that full-time care. They were comfortable, and while they understood that the maximum penalty was 6 months in jail, they felt that 6 months in jail versus any other penalty, because they would not be able to travel back to Nevada easily to appear for a bench trial, that nothing would bring their child back and nothing was going to change that. Not 6 months in jail, obviously not 12 months in jail either, probably not a million years in jail would change that. So they were comfortable with negotiating the case because of their unique situation where they were no longer within the state of Nevada and they could not easily travel back to Nevada to sort of relive and hash out that tragedy again if it were to proceed to a bench trial. However, in speaking with them, they did indicate that if this was treated as a gross misdemeanor and it did proceed through justice court and eventually district court and through a jury trial, that they would have felt more inclined to maybe try to make those accommodations to come back for a trial. But given that it was just treated as a misdemeanor bench trial, they ultimately decided that they were okay, given COVID and given the fact that travel restrictions with their disabled daughter were going to make that very difficult. They did give us the green light to negotiate the case in the way that ultimately it resulted in, which is what happened. And the judge did go along with the recommended sentence that was stipulated to by both parties.
Thank you for that additional context. I think that's helpful to know. I think that's the last question I had. I'll give a last call for committee members for questions on Assembly Bill 10. Okay, I don't see additional questions. So to our presenters, I want to say thank you and ask you to hold tight for just a moment. We're going to take testimony on the bill, and then we'll come back to you for any concluding remarks before we close out the bill hearing. So I want to start with the Zoom. I think we just had presenters on the Zoom, but I want to make sure, is there anybody else on the Zoom who would like to give testimony in support, as we are now in support of testimony for Assembly Bill 10? Okay, I don't see any activity on the Zoom. BPS, could we please go to the phone lines and see if there's anybody there who'd like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 10?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in support of Assembly Bill 10, press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to testify in support of Assembly Bill 10, press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in the queue.
Thank you, BPS. As I noted earlier, there is a letter in support for Assembly Bill 10 from We Save Lives Highway Safety Advocates. So you can find that on Nellis under the Exhibit tab. I think that's the only one there, but let me make sure I have that accurately. That's correct. So there is that letter of support. I will now close supportive testimony. I'm going to open it up for opposition. Is there anybody on the Zoom who'd like to testify in opposition? I don't believe there is, but let me just give it a minute to make sure. I don't see any activity on the Zoom. BPS, could we go to the phone lines to see if there's anybody there in opposition?
To testify in opposition of Assembly Bill 10, press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. And we will begin with the caller with the last 3 digits of 611. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Chair Yeager and members of the Assembly Judiciary Committee. This is John Piro, Johnpiro, from the Clark County Public Defender's Office. We're in opposition to this bill, but before I go into the opposition, I want to say that I'm deeply sorry for what happened to that family and the loss of the children. It's hard to even say good morning after hearing that story. I spoke with the North Las Vegas City Attorney's Office about the bill last evening, and I brought up some facts about deterrence that I want to speak with the committee about. Raising criminal penalties has not shown by research to deter crime. I wish it did, because then maybe all that increasing of penalties would have made us much more safer over all those years that we increased penalties. In fact, the Department of Justice has stated the certainty of being caught is vastly more powerful as a deterrent than the punishment given, meaning that if we had more North Las Vegas traffic cops on the streets, perhaps that would deter bad traffic more so than increased penalties. A year in jail for the gentleman that did this to the children by his negligence would not bring those children back, but I wish it would. I wish it would, but it can't. There are also unintended consequences from this bill. We will now be doing jury trials on simple negligence, which will delay civil trials, which our country has determined is really sometimes it's not even saying making it whole, but that's what people do. They sue each other. And money is the poorest remedy for a loss like this. But having a criminal trial, we will have to hire traffic experts and do a full criminal trial before the civil trial will even proceed, thereby delaying whatever modicum a civil award would be of justice to a family. There are things that could help, like better city design, better city planning, better traffic devices. But that's all revenue-raising things that would need to happen to help control traffic. Notably, there was no statistics cited where when these laws have passed in other communities, how it has deterred this type of conduct of simple negligence while driving. Perception of being caught and swift punishment are more effective deterrents than increased penalty. And what this bill does is simply increase the penalty. So for that, we are in opposition. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Pirro. BPS, could we take the next caller in opposition, please?
Yes, we will now go to caller with the last three digits of 389. Please slowly state and then spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
My name is Jennifer Noble, JenniferNoble, and I am testifying today regarding AB 10 on behalf of the Nevada District Attorneys Association. We are in opposition today, but I would like to thank sincerely Ms. Rodriguez and the prosecutors of the City of North Las Vegas for meeting with us to discuss our concerns on this bill. We weren't able to come to a consensus, but as a fellow prosecutor, I observe that they are dedicated public servants and they are working very hard in the interest of public safety. And as a mother, the facts of the Bush case and the loss and suffering that their family continues to undergo is frankly absolutely crushing. During my career, I have prosecuted some of these cases, these misdemeanor manslaughter cases, and I've observed that the families are frustrated when they learn that the person who killed their loved one while driving is being prosecuted for a misdemeanor. For the Nevada District Attorneys Association, the gravamen of our opposition is that there's no intent element in our vehicular manslaughter statute. And our Nevada Supreme Court has made clear that the simple negligence standard cited in NRS 484B.657 means, quote, ordinary negligence. The implication of this is that any person whose even momentary inattention on the road causes a fatal accident may be prosecuted for misdemeanor vehicular manslaughter. The same holds true for anyone who commits any traffic violation, such as momentarily maintaining or failing to maintain their lane of travel, rolling a stop sign, crossing a gore, exceeding the posted speed limit, failing to yield right of way. These are all acts of negligence, simple negligence, and we don't think that a jury trial for a gross misdemeanor is an appropriate remedy when an act or omission results in an accident causing death. Because NRS 484B.657 doesn't require any criminal intent or any intent at all, any willful conduct, we think it should remain a misdemeanor. And the amendment doesn't clarify which type of conduct would merit the increased punishment. We do have a reckless driving statute that contemplates the instance of death. That's NRS 484B.653. And that involves a willful or wanton disregard of the safety of persons or property. That's a Category B felony. And it sounds like the facts of this case fell somewhere in between our misdemeanor manslaughter statute and the reckless driving causing death statute. And the felony prosecutors just couldn't quite prove those elements, and that's tragic. I'll try to speed up my testimony, but I just want to make a couple more points. During the presentation, the term careless was used. Throughout Nevada, counties and municipalities have ordinances and codes that deal with careless driving. For example, in Washoe County, we have 70.3877 of our Washoe County Code, and that's careless driving, and it requires a careless disregard of the safety of persons or property on the road. So that's even got some sort of mens rea, some sort of state of mind in it. When I looked at the laws of the other states that were included in the city's presentation, it occurs to me that many of them are specific in terms of the type of prohibited conduct. It's not just simple negligence. For example, the Georgia statute contemplates acts like overtaking a school bus or fleeing a police officer when those acts result in death. In Texas, their law seems to be specific to the use of cell phones while you're driving. In Colorado, they have a careless driving statute. You're still talking about a careless and imprudent manner of driving. And the state of mind, according to their case law, is a disregard for public safety. So there is still some mental element. While this legislature may want to consider legislation specific to certain acts, like the driver committed in the Bush case, such as the use of cell phones, etc., we're concerned that making all acts of simple negligence punishable by a gross misdemeanor is just not the appropriate remedy because there's no criminal intent in our current statute. That concludes my testimony. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Noble. BPS, are there additional callers in opposition?
Yes, Chair, there are. Would the caller with the last 3 digits of 080 please slowly state and spell your name for the record? You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hi, Jim Hoffman, Hoffman, representing Nevada Attorneys for Criminal Justice. First, I would like to say as well, this is a terrible tragedy, and for what my opinion is worth, I'm sorry for the family. However, as a policy matter, NACJ opposes AB 10. As we've been talking about, the standard for this bill is simple negligence. This is not something we criminalize in other contexts. If a business owner mops the floor and fails to put down a sign, we don't put them in jail for a year if somebody slips and hits their head. Even if the doctor commits malpractice and their patient dies, we don't put the doctor in jail for a year. But that's the equivalent of what AB 10 would be allowing here. Negligence is fundamentally an unintentional, accidental event. Attaching harsher penalties to it is not going to change anyone's behavior or stop any harm from happening because nobody ever plans to commit negligent behavior in the first place. They're not doing a cost-benefit analysis that would stop them from doing the wrong thing. The tragedy that happened to this family was terrible, but AB 10 would not actually prevent things like this from happening in the future. For that reason, NACJ opposes it. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Hoffman. BPS, let's take the next caller in opposition, please.
Thank you, Chair. Would the caller with the last 3 digits of 318 slowly state and spell your name for the record? You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Chair Yeager and members of the Assembly Judiciary Committee. This is Kendra Birchie, Kendra Bertschy with the Washoe County Public Defender's Office. I want to thank the sponsors for meeting with Mr. Piro last night in order to discuss our concerns with the bill. And first, my sincere condolences to the Bush family. I wish that this bill would have the effect of giving the Bush family some closure or bringing their children back. And unfortunately, that's just not possible. We are concerned with this bill because it would, in fact, delay justice for individuals like the Bush family. As the callers indicated in opposition before me, I'll just ditto their statements regarding why we have concerns for this bill, and would just add that I am grateful that the Washoe County Sheriff's Office and other agencies in Washoe County are actively working to deter this conduct through educational campaigns such as the distracted driving campaigns, where they're undergoing additional efforts ensure to make sure that our drivers on the road are engaging in safe behaviors. And we believe that that is the more appropriate way to address these issues versus increasing the penalties, which as written will merely cause more litigation. And there's, with the way that the bill is and the conceptual amendment are written, will add just additional confusion and unfortunately delay justice. So with that, thank you for your time and consideration today, and we oppose this bill.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Birchie. BPS, are there additional callers in opposition?
To testify in opposition of Assembly Bill 10, press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no more callers in opposition.
Thank you, BPS. I will close opposition testimony. I'll now open it up for neutral testimony. I don't believe we have anyone on the Zoom who'd like to testify in the neutral position. BPS, could we go to the phone lines one more time to see if there's anybody there who'd like to testify in the neutral position?
To testify in the neutral position on Assembly Bill 10, Press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. And we will begin with the caller with the last 3 digits of 037. Please slowly state and then spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits of 037. Press star 6 now to unmute yourself and begin your testimony.
Tanya Brown, TONJABROWN, Advocates for the Inmates and the Innocent. Good morning, Chair Yeager and members of the Judiciary Committee. First, we would like to send our deepest, heartfelt condolences to the family. And I want to clarify for the record that there is no relationship between the defendant, Mr. Mark Klein, and myself for our neutral decision. We base our neutral decision on the code of ethics that some inmates within our institutions hold dearly to themselves. And that is, you do not harm a child or an elderly person. You do commit no physical or emotional or negligently harm to a child. And for those reasons, we are in neutral. Thank you.
Thank you for your neutral testimony, Ms. Brown. BPS, is there anybody else in the neutral position?
To testify in the neutral position on Assembly Bill AB 10, press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no more callers in the neutral position in the queue.
Thank you for helping us manage the phone lines, BPS. I will close neutral testimony, and at this time I'm going to hand it back over to our guests from the City of North Las Vegas to make any concluding remarks on Assembly Bill 10, and would just remind you to please state your name before you speak.
Marissa Rodriguez for the record. Thank you, Chairman Yeager and members of the committee. Thank you for listening to our presentation. As we mentioned earlier, AB 10 is about justice for the families who lose their loved ones to people who are negligent while driving. And it is about accountability. Driving a vehicle is one of the most dangerous activities that any of us can do on a daily basis. It is something that as a society we have accepted because we need it to provide for our current system. However, it is a weapon, and we need to be conscious about that. And when someone chooses to be distracted and to use their phone, there needs to be a mechanism to provide justice to the victims of those incidents. Just briefly to address one of the comments, Brad, I believe it was Attorney John Pirro. He mentioned that the civil system was the mechanism for these victims to be made whole. Well, that presumes that the defendant would have the means to pay any judgment. It would presume that the policy in their insurance limits would be sufficient to cover the medical costs and any other damages, which, as you are probably aware, it's not the case. Most people are underinsured and would not cover even for a day of the medical treatment that is necessary. I believe he also mentioned that it would delay the civil trial because it would require the criminal matter to be finalized first. And that is true, but that is the nature of matters that have both a civil and a criminal matter. And our civil system is set up in a way to allow for that. You can stay a civil matter until the criminal matter is finalized. I believe that addresses the comments. The city of North Las Vegas brought this BDR because that became this AB 10 bill because we want to protect our public. We want to protect our pedestrians. We want to protect our cyclists. We want to make our community safer. And when someone chooses, because using your phone while you're driving is a choice, when they choose to act in a negligent manner, there should be justice for the families. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Rodriguez, and the entire team from the City of North Las Vegas who joined us here this morning. And it was good to see you, Mr. Smedley. It's been a long time since I've seen you in the courtroom, so I had wondered what you were up to, and it appears you were with the City of North Las Vegas. And so good to see you. And I just want to say thank you to all of you who joined us as well. I mean, we know you have a very tough job out there as city prosecutors, and we certainly appreciate the work that you do on behalf of the community. And thank you for spending some of your time with us here this Thursday morning, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. So at this time, I'll close the hearing on Assembly Bill 10. And committee, as predicted, while we were hearing these bills, I did receive another committee BDR. Just going to check my email to make sure I didn't get yet another one. It looks like we just have one more that we have to introduce. So before we get to public comment, let's go ahead and do this. So in front of me, I have BDR 3-380, and it authorizes the issuance of an order for protection of a vulnerable adult. So I'd be looking for a motion to introduce this BDR.
I'd so move.
Second.
So we have a motion from Vice Chair Wynn, a second from Assemblyman Miller. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, Madam Secretary, would you please conduct a roll call vote?
Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod?
Yes.
Assemblywoman Cohen?
Yes.
Assemblywoman Gonzalez?
Yes.
Assemblywoman Hanson? Assemblywoman Hardy?
Yes.
Assemblywoman Kasama?
Yes.
Assemblywoman Krasner?
Yes.
Assemblywoman Marzola? Assemblyman Miller?
Yes.
Assemblywoman Wynn?
Yes.
Assemblyman O'Neill? Assemblyman Orentlicker?
Yes.
Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong?
Yes.
Assemblyman Wheeler?
Yes.
Chairman Yeager?
Yes, and I believe Assemblywoman Hanson, I don't know that we heard you, so I'll give you a chance to vote yes or no on that.
Sorry, Butterfingers. Yes.
Thank you. It's perfectly fine. We're still trying to navigate this Zoom world. Assemblywoman Marzola had to step away for a moment, and that's why she did not vote on the motion. But everybody here who is present and voted yes. So the motion does pass. That BDR will be introduced and should be on the floor as a bill this afternoon. So with that behind us, we'll now move to the final item on our agenda, which is public comment. By way of reminder, we reserve up to 30 minutes for public comment at the end of each meeting. Public commenters will have 2 minutes to make public comment. Public comment is a time to raise matters of a general nature within the jurisdiction of the Assembly Judiciary Committee. BPS, could we go to the phone lines one last time this morning and see if there's anybody there who'd like to give public comment?
Yes, Chair. To provide public comment, press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. All right. We will begin with the caller with the last 3 digits of 419. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself and then slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello. Thank you, Chair Yeager, for the opportunity to speak. My name is Benjamin Chalaman. That's BenjaminChallinor. And again, I am the Policy Director for Faith in Action Nevada. We are a member of the Nevada Housing Justice Alliance. This coming Wednesday, March 31st, just 6 days from today, both the state and federal eviction moratorium are set to expire. And again, up to 500,000 Nevadans are estimated to be at risk of facing eviction. We need to make sure that we act now to do something that we can make sure that these Nevadans stay in their home. In the long term, one of those or two of those actions that could be done is passing AB 141 and AB 161. In the short term, we can make sure that we extend the moratorium to make sure that the federal assistance that has been provided in the ARP, as well as the rental assistance and the unemployment that is still to be sent out to Nevadans get to Nevadans' homes so they can make sure to stay in their home. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your public comment, Mr. Challenor. BPS, let's take the next caller for public comment, please.
Thank you. Would caller with the last three digits of 556 please slowly state and spell your name for the record? You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Anne Marie Grant, ANNEMARIE, GRANT. My brother Thomas Purdy was killed by Reno Police and Washoe County Sheriff's Office 10/8/2015 during mental health crisis. I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself. I am 40 years old. I've lived 2 years longer than my older brother. I'm the mom to a 19-year-old son, Brian. He is my only child. And of course, like most parents, I feel blessed to be his mom. I truly lucked out when he was younger and was lucky to avoid misfortunate incidents. My son was the kid running home, and when I'd ask why he was home so soon, he'd without hesitation let me know so-and-so was throwing rocks at windows, and he didn't want to get in trouble. But what I do, besides trying to advocate for change in the laws, I also can try to connect other families who have lost a loved one to police, because there is a negative stigma that comes along with it, and it is isolating. When I hang up the phone, I'm here alone with my thoughts, and just like all those mothers and fathers out there who have lost a loved one to police, they are too, and there isn't much support for people like us. But enough about that. I became actively engaged in your local state and local government. I have to give acknowledgement to advocate for the innocent and the inmate, Tanya Brown. I came across her brother, Nolan Klein's wrongful conviction online and saw how she's been fighting for change and justice for Nolan with every fiber of her being. She has become a mentor, ally, teacher, supporter, but most of all, a friend. It's due to her encouragement I became active in calling the legislator, making public records requests, and to have the strength and tenacity like she does to never give up, never stop fighting for what's right and the truth. It's so important to me what's happened with policing and the justice system in your state. My brother was killed by police. They're stolen from us. How could it not matter to me? Please support bills that promote transparency and accountability. And I too would like to send my condolences to the family that lost their children. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment, Ms. Grant. BPS, if there are additional callers for public comment, let's take the next one, please.
To make public comment, press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, the line is open and working, and there are no more callers in the queue.
Thank you so much, BPS. Appreciate your help, as always. I will now close public comment. Anything else from our very hardworking committee members before we talk about tomorrow and next week? Okay, I don't see anything. Thank you, committee members, for this morning. Obviously heard some very emotional testimony, and I know that's can be difficult to sit through, but I appreciate your attention and engagement on the bills today. In terms of where we go tomorrow, we have a meeting. We're going to meet at 8:30, which I know is a bit unusual for us, but mark your calendars, 8:30. We're going to hear two bills tomorrow, one from Assemblyman Roberts dealing with cannabis, and another from our own member, Assemblywoman Hardy, dealing with animal abuse. And then for next week, we don't yet have agendas out because we're waiting for some bills to be introduced on the floor, but I do anticipate we will have committee every day next week. I just don't know the start time. I'm thinking we're probably going to start at 8:30 on Monday, but I'll be able to confirm that with you all tomorrow, and we'll go from there. Obviously, sitting through this committee, you've seen that we're getting a slew of committee bills introduced. I am still waiting on more, so I do expect the next couple weeks to be fairly busy, so don't be surprised if you start to see 3, 4, or 5 bills stacked up on an agenda. We'll try to get through them in a timely manner. And again, want to encourage members, things will happen fast and furious, but if you read a bill the night before and you have questions, feel free to reach out to me or to the sponsor. It may be helpful in helping us move hearings along to try to get some of those questions answered offline if possible. So with all that behind us, committee, thank you again for all your hard work this week. We will see you tomorrow back in this committee at 8:30 in the morning. Until then, have a great day. This meeting is adjourned.